From neighborhood chats to corporate boardrooms, everybody is talking about inflation. And today we were blessed with the latest CPI numbers. Are you ready for it? 9.1%. But wait, there's more. In my quest to fully understand CPI, I have made one final conclusion. It's a crock of shit. And here's why. It woefully and inadequately reflects the true cost of shelter, home prices, and rent in a time of record housing inflation. Shelter makes up about 1/3 of the CPI, 40% of the core CPI. And I don't have to tell you that housing has skyrocketed. Of that 1/3, about 8% is meant to reflect rental increases and 24% reflects housing prices increase. Now we know housing prices have increased 25% over last year and rent is up 20% over last year. Yet this month's CPI reported a year-over-year increase in shelter cost of, wait for it, 5.6%. 20 to 25% versus 5.6%. Where did this magical number come from? Well, as for rent, once every 6 months, the Bureau of Labor Statistics surveys 48,000 rental units. We have 48 million rental units in the United States. So once every 6 months, the Bureau surveys 1% of rental units to calculate rent inflation. As for homeownership, they do not actually consider home prices. No. They have a calculation dubbed homeowners equivalency of rent, where the Bureau calculates a hypothetical value of rent as if you were to move out of your home and lease it to someone else. If you listen to the Wall Street Journal's What's News podcast, you should, by the way, Chief Economics correspondent Nick Timiraos was interviewed this morning, and he continued to emphasize that CPI numbers are underreporting shelter expense, partly because they don't actually consider home prices, but also because the data used is old. He says in some instances, the shelter component of CPI may be using data that reflects changes in lease agreements and rental contracts that are more than a year old. Our shelter prices did not peak until a few months ago, meaning that this shocking 9.1% CPI increase still isn't reflecting the actual peak of shelter prices, which means we anticipate the shelter component of CPI to continue to increase in future months because of the lag in reporting. So for all of us crossing our fingers and waiting for these CPI numbers to start dropping, we might as well go back to our 10th birthday party and ask mom and dad for another pony. It's not going to happen anytime soon. We would need all other components of the CPI, like gas and food, to drop sharply to overcome the given drag of shelter prices. Bottom line, I don't trust the CPI, particularly in this environment. I think it's inherently flawed. However, because the underlying calculations have at least remained consistent, we can use the data point in relative terms to itself, meaning we can make an observation based on the CPI from a year ago compared to the CPI today. One silver lining is that the Fed actually uses the Personal Consumption Expenditure Index, which underweights shelter cost compared to CPI. Only about 1/6 of that index reflects shelter, but there is no way the Fed can make policy decisions and totally ignore a 9.1% CPI. Even more alarming, economists claim that if shelter was accurately represented in CPI, we'd already be in double-digit inflation to the tune of 12 to 13%. So now that I have dashed your inflation hopes and dreams, let's see what comes out next month. That's it for this week. This is Jeannie, the 401k lady.